I will start getting into some filters. But first off, I'm going to just filter this down by location name. So this, just quick review, standard filtering. You select filter from this little drop-down menu for the column. Opens up this new window. Select your operator. In this case, we're going to do the default equal to is in. And just to make the report a little bit more manageable and easy to view so we don't have to scroll down to see the whole thing, I'm only going to select a few locations. So let's do graphic novels, main collection, leisure reading, and new books. For our purposes right now, we don't need the patron group column, so we'll get rid of it. So right now, this is recording all of the loans that Alma has Alma has measured that have gone out in these different locations. But let's say you want to only see the loans that went out in a particular date range. In that case, you'd want to find whatever category in your particular report has to do with dates. In this case, it's the loan dates. Now you can filter generally by these categories: your fiscal year, the month, the calendar year, the quarter. You can filter by the exact loan date. But let's say you wanted to filter by a relative date. You wanted to filter in, say, the last fiscal year or the last week. Now you could do that by setting specifically the exact date or month you wanted to use in a filter. You could say you want to filter between the 1st of July and the 31st of July. But then you'd have to go in and reset that filter every single time you wanted to look at, okay, I want to look at last month's loans or last month's transactions, anything having to do with a date. To make things easier on you, Analytics actually includes this nice loan date filter column. So if you add that column in and filter by it, it gives you a bunch of preset relative dates that you can filter by. You could say last 7 days, current fiscal year, current month, current year. So very useful. Let's look at the loans for the last 30 days. Probably want to get rid of that column. And now we're going to see everything that's been loaned out in the last 30 days. And the wonderful thing is that when you open this report up in a week, it's going to show you the last 30 days of loans starting by the day that you opened up the report. So no need to go in and change it for every single time you want to run the report. It'll just automatically show you the relative date range that you've selected. Which is wonderful if the relative date range that you want is included in that preset list. If you want to do kind of an oddball custom relative date range, let's say 3 weeks, they don't have a relative date range that says the last 3 weeks. It is possible to do that. It's just a little bit more complicated. So first off, let's get rid of this last 30 days filter. And for that, for a custom relative date range, you're going to want to first off add in the just general date column. In this case, it's going to be loan dates. Going to set a filter. But instead of selecting the values from here, we're going to check this convert this filter to SQL box. And that's going to open up a new window where it's going to show you the SQL code. And I will admit I do not have this code memorized. I have it written down, and I also have the page of documentation from Alma that has this code in it, bookmarked on my computer. So I have to go back and find it all the time, but there's a way that you can put in your relative date code here. So in this case, we want to do anything within the last 21 days, so 3 weeks. So we want, we'll add in the greater to or equal sign. Day. So the anatomy of this filter is right here. It's confirming that this is time-stamped. You want this filter to look at the timestamp for your current date, which is why right here you have current date. This number here is the number value that you want to look at prior to your current date. And how you have day here, that is the definition of this number value. So in this case, we want to look at every loan date that took place 21 days prior to the current date. Here you can also put month or year. You can put in whatever number you like here. And I think current date, pretty much for a relative date, you want to keep that the same, but I believe you can actually put in different values for this as well, although you may not be needing the time-stamped factor for that. And you can do some pretty complicated things with this as well. I've done between functions. I've built between filters with this, like filtering between 3 weeks ago and 4 weeks ago. So once you figure out how the formatting works and play around with it, you can get some pretty interesting stuff out of it. But let's see if I got it right. Get rid of this. And here we go. These are all the loans that have taken place within the last 3 weeks.
Excuse me, Kim,
yes.
Can you put the link to the Alma page that has the sequels?
It's in the slides.
In the slides.
Yep. I made sure to link that in the slides. That page actually has a whole lot of very interesting things you can do in analytics on it. A lot of just general useful tasks you could perform, and it's got some pretty good documentation, which is nice to see in Alma. So does anybody have any questions about working with date filters in Alma? All right, in that case, we're going to move on to we're going to work more with filters, and we're going to do some complex filters in general. So get rid of that date filter. So let's say you want to get even more granular in seeing how many loans were taken out from these locations. You want to see how many loans were taken out for books of a certain subject. So for that, what you can do is go in, we're going to look at the classification code. And let's say you want to look at all the loans for everything in AS, B, and you want to look at everything from PN as well. Unfortunately, if you scroll all the way down here, this list doesn't show everything because there's a lot of classification codes. What you need to do for that is you actually need to go in and search for the value that you need. So for that, click this little search icon here, opens up a new window, and it allows you to search for the value that you need. So you can select your operator here, starts with, contains, and, or you can do a pattern match, so similar things. In this case, we know exactly what we want for PN. But it's not going to pull anything up because right now we have this match case box checked. In general, it's a good idea to uncheck this match case box. I kind of wish that it wasn't default. But now we have it. We can highlight it. And you select this arrow over here to move it over. If you say searched for anything that starts with a Q, you want to pull over everything. You don't need to actually highlight these and pull them over one by one. You can just select this icon instead, move everything over. If you don't want something in your selected list, you can move it back. So now that we have all set up, you just click OK. Click OK again. And you have exactly the data that you want. You can also, in this case, with classification codes, this is pretty easy to do. But if you understand the formatting here, you can build your filters from scratch without needing to search for everything. So, and the formatting here is really easy. It's just the value and then a semicolon. And the end of the string has nothing. So we could do okay, except I take the semicolon off the end. And here we are. This I found is really easy if for whatever reason you need to filter by, say, a list of ISBNs. You can actually, if there's a way in Excel that you can take a column's worth of values and merge them into a single cell with each value separated by a specific character. So you can do that for, say, a long list of ISBNs that you want to make a report out of in ALMA. Get it into a single cell, each value separated by a semicolon, and then just copy that into the text box for your filter. And that way you don't need to search for 30, 40, 50 separate ISBN numbers or MSS IDs, anything like that. So knowing how to build the filter, how to format your filters from scratch is pretty useful in that case. The only...
Sorry, just a quick question.
Yep.
It isn't case sensitive, though?
I believe that this value field is case sensitive.
So if you had put a lowercase,
Right.
lowercase b, it wouldn't have shown anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
The one downside is the more values you have in a filter, the slower the report is going to run. So if you have 300 separate title values or ISBNs, that's going to be a very, very slow report to run. And the other useful, more complex thing that you can do with filters is you can actually create a filter based on the results of another analytics report, which I've found to be very useful with expenditures reports. Because in most cases with expenditures reports, the one column that is missing is item location. So if you want to say figure out how much money, the individual expenditures or expenditure amounts for the main collection or your leisure reading collection or anything like that, there's no good way to do that with the set values in your expenditures report because there's no item location category. So what you actually need to do is you need to create another report. And in this case, what's good is a physical items report. So what I want to do is I want to create a report of how many of the individual expenditures for the main collection from fiscal year 2018. So I've got my filters in this particular report already set up, got expenditures, got the year limitations. Now I just need to put in the item locations. No way to do that from here. So you just create a physical items report that can do it for you. For that, you need a shared column between the two reports. One thing that is shared between the two types of reports is bibliographic details. So if we find an identifying value from bibliographic details, in this case I believe I will use MMSID. So we add that in. And then we want to filter this by location. So here we do have the location field. Open this up. Filter by location name. We wanted to use main collection. Get rid of this. Really, you just want one column in this report. You just want the ID column filtered by whatever data you need it filtered by to get the list of IDs that you need. So this is going to be the MMS IDs for every item that is in the main collection. We're going to save this. Then we go back to our previous report. And we want to add in the MMSID column. So we go under bibliographic details, add MMSIDs. We're going to filter it. And from the operators list, we go all the way to the bottom and select is based on results of another analysis. And that's going to allow you to browse the analysis, select what you need. So you can select your operator here is equal to any, is not equal, less than, greater than, all the general operators. We're going to do is equal to any. We want to use the values in this column. Actually, you can, if you have more than one column in that report, you can select which column you want to use from that report. In this case, we only have MMS IDs, so we only have the one option. Click OK. And then we can leave that in. If we hop over here, better idea. So once it finishes running, we'll be able to see how much has been spent in fiscal year, or not. Might not. In any case, what should happen is that once you have this filter in place, you'll be able to see the results of your current report as filtered by the column results from your previous report. And I'm not sure why it's not working now. I had it working yesterday with this precise configuration, but you can test it out on your own and see what you find. So does anybody have any questions about the more complicated filtering that you can get into? All right, so what I'm going to move on to next is editing column formulas. that, we're going to hop back into our training fulfillment report. And for this case, to start off, I'm going to add in 2 more columns of loans. So there's a couple different things that you can do when you edit column formulas. To do it, first off, from the drop-down menu here, you select Edit Formula. And it's going to open up this new window here. So, one thing here, you can, up at the top, change the headings of your column, which is nice to do, especially because you're going to be changing the data that shows up in this column. So it's nice to add in your own custom name to the column so you can see easily what the data is. If you don't do that, Analytics will automatically change the name of the column for you, but it's going to be a very convoluted, it's going to look very much like the formula that you put in. So it's not going to be very human readable. So there's a couple different things you can do down here. These are your options. This one here is the function option. You can insert specific functions into your column. This one is the filter. You can actually filter by specific columns. This option only works for measures. If you're not working in a column that's already a measure, you cannot filter the specific column. So since this loans column is a measure, we can work with the filtering. This here will allow you to select different columns from your report to add into your formula. Variable, you can select different variables to add into your new formulas. And then over here, you can just select different operators to add in if you didn't feel like typing them in on your keyboard. So for this particular one, we're going to filter this column. I'm going to filter the loans column. And let's filter it by patron group. So let's say in this column you want to see, we're going to look at all right, let's pull up DC Basic. So by doing that, you see we've changed the formula in here. Instead of just loans.loans, now we have this whole string that's basically saying that the values that we see in the resulting column are going to be filtered using the particular data that we selected. So we select OK. That was the first column here, actually. We forgot to change the name. So let's just go. Let us know how we're filtering the column. Jump over to results. And you see the numbers are, this is total number of loans. And over here we have the loans that were just taken out by this particular user group. Go back. We can do that for pretty much as many columns as we want. Let's filter this one. Same sort of thing. But let's filter by staff this time. Faculty would be a good number. Formula update. And in this case, I want to show you guys what the custom change header looks like. So I'm not going to change it up here. So see, now the column is headed up with the changed formula. So not very pretty looking. But if we jump over here, so this is just a nice way to it ends up looking very similar to a pivot table, but you don't have to add in a pivot table. So one thing you do have to be careful with is sometimes sometimes I've found when you filter you're filtering, say, a loans column and a renewal and a recall column, just different measures within the same report, and you're trying to filter them individually. Sometimes that seems to mess up the numbers. I'm not entirely sure why. But if you'd like, you can always play around with it and see what works for you. And last off, I'm going to show you just a very quick just changing of a columns function. A useful thing with changing a column formula by adding in a function, well, one of the useful things that I've found is that you can create measure columns out of facts. So in this case, what I want to do is, so we have the number of loans that went out to everybody. We have the total, staff, students, but these are the number of loans that are within these particular locations. We don't know how many individual items got loaned out, because we might have had one item that got loaned out 20 times. So in order to do that, in order to see how many individual items got loaned out, let's create a measure column out of the barcode category. So we'll pull in a barcode category, edit the formula, and if we select function down here, it's going to let us insert a function. In this case, what we want to do is we want count distinct, because that's going to count the appearances of distinct values within this particular column. So select that column, that function, click OK. It's changed our formula for us. OK again. And now you'll see that instead of the blue icon here that denotes a fact, we're getting this yellow ruler icon here that denotes a measure. So we've turned this fact column into a measure. And if we hop over into our results tab, now we're going to actually see how many individual items were loaned out in these collections. So you see we've got a lot of duplicates in some of these columns, or in some of these, with some of these loans. A lot of items that are just being loaned out multiple times. You can also, some of the other things you can play around with functions is you can create a column that's a mathematical operation of several different columns within a report. So you could say create a column that's your total of recalls and loans or anything like that. So you can do a lot of fun things, and it can be very complicated. I feel like you get a lot out of it once you start learning how the coding works. I think it's SQL that you end up working with, and I don't know that particular language off the top of my head, so I pretty much find that the best way that I learn is through general experimentation, seeing what works, what doesn't. And I have found that analytics itself, or I believe Oracle actually, has a pretty robust help feature. So if you go up here under help contents, you can do it. Basically, the top one will be the results for the particular area that you're in. And once you're in there, you can navigate around to different options. It's very useful. It's good to peruse over if you're looking into something more complex. So, anybody have any questions? Anything they'd like me to show?
Kim, can you just go
Yes.
back to the formula
Yes.
choices again for a second?
Yeah.
So you want to get unique barcodes. You
Yes.
want to find out how many. Yeah, I can't read that. So I was just wondering
Yeah.
what you clicked on so I could see what your choices were.
All right. That would be.
So you edited the formula, right? And
Yep.
You picked
Edit the
first
formula.
function.
Yep. Function.
Yep.
And if you go onto the first option, aggregate,
Yep.
open that up. Right here, there's a count distinct option.
Cool.
And it gives you, the nice thing is, it gives you a little description. Every formula has a brief little description
That's the stuff
as
I
well.
didn't see. This is good.
So if you're poking around, you can see brief descriptions of the functions before you apply them to your reports.
And these are just the built-in functions, right?
Yes, these are just the built-in functions. I'm pretty sure once you understand, if you understand more about SQL and the way that the things are supposed to be put together, you can create your own functions and
Because it gives you
formulas.
the format once it's in here, right? So if I choose this, I can see the format.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right.